So tonight we are joined by Natasha Reynolds, a registered psychotherapist based in the Toronto area. And my name is Kim Knight, and I am the co founder of The Village. And of course, as all my Inner Village members here tonight, thank you so much for tuning in. Natasha, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we were just saying right before letting everyone in that this is almost your 1 year anniversary with Village Talk.
Yes.
Yeah, we had our first and last Village Talk with Natasha last year, almost around the same time.
hmm
Um, and what a transition in time it has been since then, right?
I know.
Yeah. So before we start tonight, I definitely would love to just introduce a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about, how to use this space, of course, and a little bit about who Natasha is. So tonight we are going to be discussing the theme of welcoming change. And if this is your first time joining Village Talk, this is conversation is going to be about an hour. It's also a space that would love to remain a space of respect and sensitivity. So we absolutely encourage you to turn on your cameras if you'd like. If you do want to share a comment or have a question, you can raise your hand and then unmute yourself and ask directly, or you can use the chat to write it in. We also ask that you stay engaged, right? I think everyone's voice here is super important. So we definitely want you to contribute when you feel the need to. And this conversation will be recorded, so it will be available to you at a later date as well. Now, if you haven't done so before, Natasha drops a lot of gems. So I recommend that you grab a notebook and a pen, something to take some notes on. Um, and lastly, we absolutely thank you for joining us tonight. We know you can be doing anything else, but you're here. So welcome once again to Inner Village. And we look forward to sharing this space with you. We acknowledge you as well as the land in which you're joining from. So, Natasha, let us know. I do want to just start with um, some introduction questions, right?
Mhm.
You are, and I'll go ahead and let everyone know that you are a registered psychotherapist. You're also an empowerment coach, and you really work to help individuals build their assertiveness, self leadership, and emotional intelligence, right?
Mhm.
So, talk to us a little bit about who Natasha is. Kind of, who does Natasha come from? What's the family legacy like that has brought you to this beautiful space?
Yeah, sounds good. Well, my upbringing, I am an only child. I'm half Jamaican, half Italian. So my dad's Jamaican, my mom's Italian. And I really started to get into the mental health field actually from encountering my own challenges when I was a young, probably 12, 13, that age, and actually had to go seek a psychotherapist. So from there, I was in a place where I just really appreciated the safe environment and how I walked away with so much hope from those sessions together, and I felt so empowered that that was what really sparked my fascination growing up, just really seeing that difficulties can be used as an opportunity for growth, and that I can connect with people through that, and actually, actually embrace those difficulties as opposed to running from them. So it was that was kind of where it started to get my interest in the field, and then from there went off to school and started studying psychology, and really became more interested in more of the assertiveness training down the road in my practice, because I feel like a lot of people have such an association to the word assertiveness. They, especially as women, the association to assertiveness can be like, does this mean I'm intimidating? And all the societal pressures around that. So I really started to have an interest in that. And that's where I got into more of the empowerment coaching lane of things and helping in regards to self leadership and development. So, yeah, a little bit about me.
That's amazing. And so you mentioned that you help others build their self-assertion, emotional intelligence, and
Mhm,
those really special skills.
mhm,
Why do you think that's important?
mhm. Yeah, so assertiveness in particular, that's a lot of times in counseling or psychotherapy, we do what's called assertiveness training. So that's a way to really communicate your needs in a healthy way. Oftentimes when we feel, maybe frustrated, that's usually an indicator that we should tune into that and really check out what's happening for us. And oftentimes it's an unmet need, so looking at how to express those needs in a healthy way so others can understand us is really essential for relationship building. It's essential for relationships in our workspace, in our personal relationships. And when people understand us, we also open ourselves up to understand others as well. So it's so important to be able to recognize that we are allowed to honor our needs and be able to ask for that in a healthy way. And a lot of the confusion can come from not knowing how to necessarily express ourselves or articulate ourselves. And that sometimes results in us not sharing. So that kind of robs us from that state of connection with others and essentially having those needs met that are important.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. I love the point mentioned about, not knowing how to ask for what we need or asking for
Mhm.
help even. And I know we'll dive into that, but that's definitely something that I know I've struggled with.
Yeah.
Um, and so we talk a lot about change, especially during this time,
Mhm.
living in a time of uncertainty. I have a question for everyone joining us. So, what are the changes that you are currently experiencing? And once again, feel free to write it in the chat, or if you'd prefer to say it on microphone, just raise your hand, and that way we can call you by your name. But essentially, yeah, what are some changes that you are currently experiencing? Natasha, what about you? What are some changes that you're experiencing right now?
Yeah. Well, currently, from a vulnerability standpoint, I feel like I've been more present on social media, wanting to even use my voice and even being in these types of conversations. That kind of was an initial change for me to just put myself out there and be confident in using my voice as opposed to, maybe more comfortable in one on one settings. So that was definitely a change for me in terms of learning how to just embrace that.
Yeah, yeah. Very similar to what you're saying. I am also in this transition of growth and change, where I'm really stepping out as an entrepreneur and trying new things, and that requires me to put myself out there a lot more than I typically would. I like to consider myself as more of an introvert, but here I am on Zoom having this conversation with you, right? And also building this beautiful community. Um, so I'll go ahead and read some of the changes. So we have Monica, who's talking about a career change,
Mhm.
um, potentially. And that's, if she can be brave to explore those possibilities. We love that, Monica. We have Tiana that's sharing health and physical changes, as well as a change of environment. She's getting ready to move home.
Mm.
And she has a smiley face. So I'm going to say congratulations on that as well. Some other changes. So we have some people sharing changes among the family in regards
Mhm.
to the role that they play as a kid and now establishing their voice within the family.
Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
definitely. That's a huge change, I would say. I would definitely consider that one with a lot of impact. Um, and then we also have some people sharing about their change in mindset.
Mm.
So feeling of outgrowing my current work environment. Yep, I've been there.
Mhm.
Showing up and putting myself out there. So there we go. Lots of things in common in this room.
Yeah.
And lastly, we have Shanique that shared, I started a new job last week and I'm working remotely. It's definitely a change since I was working in person throughout the pandemic.
Hmm.
Thank you all for sharing so much. Oh, we have one more. The change started with the pandemic, giving up traveling. I used to travel a lot. It's part of my identity. I feel the same way. That's been a huge change. So here we are sharing some of the changes that we're currently feeling or experiencing. And I want to know from your point of view, why is change so hard? Like we
Mm,
know change is going to happen, but why is it so hard for us?
yes. Well, oftentimes we are such creatures of habit that change is almost like a threat that comes in. So the feeling of I need to now switch things up can be our bodies literally assessing, is this a threat? And if this is a
Mm,
threat, then how do I prepare for this? And sometimes when we are so used to something being familiar, the unfamiliar can feel like a threat. So that makes sense to why we have this sometimes resistance that can come up when we notice change. And that's when we start to feel those symptoms more. Maybe we're noticing it in our bodies where we're thinking, oh, there's something in the pit of my stomach, this feeling. And just really recognizing that all these things associated with change are essentially our body protecting ourselves. So it's sometimes just doing what it's supposed to do. And that's why being able to
mm.
identify what our body's tendency to do, and it's so validating because we can say, ah, okay, it's changed. That makes sense. I'm going to get into this state of resistance because this feels unfamiliar. And my natural tendency is to want to go to certainty. But also, sometimes that aspect of uncertainty can also be exciting and bring up some feelings of like new stimuli. This is what we need to kind of feel engaged as well. So there can be two sides to that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned, Natasha, that our body is kind of doing what it's supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the reality is that sometimes that can feel so uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one of the things is that we talked about. Well, somebody mentioned mindset. What significant role does our mindset and attitude play when it comes to navigating change, basically?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a great question. Oftentimes, when our body is responding to this stressor or this potential threat, our body's nervous system is stimulated. So, our mindset has the ability to now interpret what's going on for us. So, when we are focused on getting our mindset in a position of really being intentional about how we're viewing change, can actually help us regulate our body and calm down our nervous system and be able to reframe what's happening, reframe how we're seeing change. Are we seeing change as it's something to be feared, or are we seeing change as something to be welcomed? So,
Hmm.
yeah, that would be a
Yeah.
big aspect of mindset.
Mm.
And oftentimes our mind goes into this what if standpoint. So the what if change is happening, then what if I fail? What if I'm not able to have the resources, or what if I'm not able to, get, I don't know, perform properly? Like all those things come up naturally, and it's okay to address the fear, the feeling of fear that comes up, but it doesn't mean that we need to stay there. And that's
Yeah.
why asking the question, well, there's what if on the scary side, but there's also the what are the possibilities? What are the potential positive outcomes from this change? So that's a real way to embrace change, is to look at that and look at the what is the possibilities of this change and get excited about it and really be able to harvest the good from that.
I love that. I love that so much because there really are two sides to what ifs, right? Um, and I love that you mentioned the other side, that sometimes we forget the positive things that can come from change.
Mhm.
So, my question to everyone that's currently joining us, what are some feelings that you experienced during change. And maybe those of you that shared before kind of what the changes are, maybe let us know, like, what are your feelings about those changes? And if you didn't get a chance to share with us what the changes are, let us know in general. What types of feelings do you generally experience? So, Natasha, I am a big what if person. I like automatically I think a lot about what ifs. Slightly type A. Um, but unfortunately, the what ifs a lot of the time fall more on the negative thing.
Mhm.
What if it fails? What if, this doesn't work out? What if, right?
Mhm.
But recently, that was something that I was able to identify.
Mhm.
And that was through a little bit of help with therapy. I was able to identify that I was doing that a lot and then still thinking about the what ifs. But now, if I'm going to think, so my rule is if I'm going to think about a negative what if, I have to come up with a positive one too.
Mm.
Right. And so that's something that I've been kind of trained in my mindset to do. Speaking on that. So that's
Good.
that's really really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
so I see some people are sharing in the chat as well. So we have some feelings of panic, but also feelings of excitement and also liberation. I love that.
Mm. Yes.
I love that. Yeah. What else do we have? We have feelings of nervousness, overthinking, anxiety, negative thoughts, but also knowing that change is good for my growth.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's that duality of feelings that can come up during this time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is that generally something that you've noticed as well in your practice as a psychotherapist, Natasha?
Mhm.
When people are thinking about change, are they thinking a lot of times about both, or are they more focused on either or side? What comes up mostly?
Yeah, so a lot of times when we're experiencing something or going through a situation, it's like there's different parts of ourselves that are present in that moment. So to recognize those parts and really say that's okay. Like a part of me is feeling fearful, or a part of me is feeling a bit anxious and restless, or but a part of me is also feeling excited. So sometimes being able to just sit with the different parts of you that are coming up can really help gain perspective that we don't need to just dive into this one part of fear. We can address it, we can say it's there, but it doesn't need to take driver. It doesn't need to dominate. So, really being able to address it, I think it's so important as opposed to being like, oh, I can't feel fear. In order for me to be successful at change is to only feel excited. And that's the thing. It's okay to recognize fear and being able to say that's there, that's present. How do I get into perspective with that?
I love that because I definitely think there is this need to kind of normalize the feeling of fear,
Mm.
and not, so I love that you share that. We have some other people sharing in the chat. So we have feelings of overthinking, restlessness, initial discomfort, and expecting the worst.
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned on this topic of fear, how do we actually learn to identify the fears that tend to hold us back?
Mm-hmm. That's a really great question. I know that for fear, when it's holding us back, we notice fear can manifest in so many ways. I know sometimes it can manifest so physically for people. Sometimes it can manifest so mentally where our thoughts are just racing. So really taking a
Mm.
moment to pause with that fear and know, okay, this is what's taking place for me. How am I noticing fear show up is I would say is the first step to really be able to address it. And when we notice it, then that's when we can also almost meet those needs. So if getting really fearful and let's say my heart is beating so fast where I can't think straight, then that can be a moment for me to say, okay, let me take a moment to just practice some intentional deep breaths. Or if I'm noticing my thinking become very all over the place where I don't even know what thought is what anymore, and it's just going into so many different areas, that can be an indicator to say, okay, let me just sit down with this. Maybe I want to pull out my journal and just write down what are the core fears that are coming up. Just get them out on paper. So they're not just running around in the back office. And oftentimes when we put them out there, we go, wait a second, we can actually hold up the truth to it. And some of these fears are rooted in lies. That's why I know someone use an acronym for fear, which can be false evidence appearing real. Sometimes it feels so real when we're thinking about it and just, have all these thoughts racing and all these worst case scenarios coming up. It's almost like our body goes to that state and we actually feel like we're living in it. And that is scary. So, of course, we're going to want to resist change because we just played it out in our heads. So, when we can actually just pause and be like, okay, I'm experiencing change, I'm experiencing transition. And with change and transition, it is so, so common for fear to come up because it's uncertain. My body's trying to protect me. It's almost like thank your body. Thank your body for doing what it's doing. It's not trying to hurt you, it's actually trying to protect you. And then you thanking yourself, it actually, your brain goes, oh, okay, there's no threat here. Thank you for that. I can just now exhale a bit and get to, like, when you exhale, the power of your breath can really allow you to get your resources back where you can actually start thinking more clearly.
I love that so much, Natasha. This idea that fear can manifest as your body that's actually protecting you. I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
I have never ever thought about it that way. So I'm gonna remember that.
Good.
I'm going to remember that. Yeah, that's amazing.
Mhm.
Perfect. So how do we turn into change?
Yeah. So to turn into change, oftentimes we try to see change and we'll say, no, this is uncomfortable. Either I don't want to address it, or really going, just feeling like I'm frozen in change. So I think the most important part is recognizing what is your natural tendency when you respond to change or transition. I know for myself, when I was going to university, I remember my response to going to a new environment and being in change. I was just like super scared, and that's when I started to overthink and I started to question, am I really supposed to be here? That's where all the doubts started to come in. And really recognizing, I had to take a moment and say, I'm in change right now. This is a transition. Of course, I'm going to feel this way. So once I was able to just normalize that and say, it's okay, I'm in change, that's when you actually start to say, okay, that's helping ease it a bit. So when we tune into it, we want to look at the possibilities of what can come out of this change. So in that moment, if I was just thinking of my fears in that moment, I would be thinking of, this is, I don't think I'm supposed to be at this school, all this stuff, I'm not making friends, all these different things that were happening at the time. But if I were to say, let me think of what the possibilities are, and I can say, well, you know what, it's only my first week of school. Of course I'm going to feel this way. I can, the possibilities is I'm going to meet some great people. The possibilities of I'm going to really enjoy the school. The possibilities is after a month I'll really be more comfortable in this role, and I'll have a better head on my shoulders if this is where I want to stay. You get to really get into the perspective of what can the possibilities be from this change. And that's a really great way to really turn into change, is when you start harvesting the good and harvesting the actual positive impacts that can come from this. And another way to turn into change is, how are we talking to ourselves through it? Are we saying, I've never been through change anymore before, and all change means terrible outcomes? There's often times where we have previous situations where we've gone through change and we said, you know what, it was actually really uncomfortable in that moment, but the outcome was great. And that, using that same example of when I went to university, I was able to reflect on, wait a second, I've moved schools before. And I remember feeling this exact same way. And I actually felt like I was in the right space after a month or 2 weeks at that point. So really reflecting on where you've overcome these feelings can be a really helpful resource to know that you are equipped to go through this change, and that great possibilities is a very plausible outcome. So yeah, that would be my tips on how to turn into change.
Definitely. I love that the perspective, again, it's kind of, sometimes these are things that we know and sometimes things that we tell others. And yet to
Mhm.
hear these reminders and put that into practice ourselves, I think is so important. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Um, for oh, perfect. I see that the question was answered in the chat. So somebody wanted to know the acronym that was used for fears,
Mhm.
so that they can write that down. So thank you so much for sharing that. So for the participants in the chat, what is it that you find you need during times of change? And I definitely would love to know from you as well, Natasha. What is it that you find you need?
Yeah. For myself, oftentimes in change, I know that I need to really be connected with a community of people that I trust and they will be able to validate what I'm experiencing. It's that feeling of security. And actually, from studies and research, it's actually shown that when you have a secure attachment, so like a relationship that you feel like you can rely on and you can go to for that comfort, and you know that they're going to be there, those people are actually able to navigate in the world more freely with less fear, because they know, or they're more willing to even take risks because they know that they go back home to a safe and secure base. So that would be a big thing for me. My faith is very important to me. So really having that time, alone time and reflection and prayer is very important for me to adapt through change. So those are some of the indicators for myself.
I felt both of those things of what you said. In particular for me, I know community, a really solid support system is something that I find I need, and that during times of change and even when there's no change happening, right?
Yeah.
So we have some shared thoughts as well in the chat. So I'm seeing comfort and safety, which you mentioned. Innate trust in myself, which is amazing and super important as well.
Mhm.
Let's see what else we have. Reassurance, security, support, connecting with people who have been through a similar situation.
Mhm.
And then we had someone that shared the importance of having time alone to tune in without too many distractions.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yes to everything that was shared. That's so
Mhm.
beautiful. So when it comes to life transitions, right,
Mhm.
we tend to showcase our resiliency, and the way in which that we can adapt. In
Mhm.
particular, if we think about what has happened over this past year,
Mhm.
what are some ways in which that we can enhance these skills?
Yeah. Well, resiliency and enhancing that aspect is really being able to recognize your mindset. Is a huge portion of that. Also recognizing your resources that you're equipped with. Oftentimes when we are going from a position of, you know, uncertainty, and if we're living in that place of uncertainty, we're starting to tell ourselves that we're not equipped, and all those things can start overwhelming us.
Mm.
So in order to enhance that, it's really important to be intentional about what you're feeding your mind. And that's even knowing the information you're filling your mind with. If I know that I'm going to be hanging around people that all they focus on is lack and fear-based conversation, then I'm going to have to say, you know what, I need to protect myself in this moment because I know that I'm vulnerable. So I need to really be intentional about the information I'm taking in and the information that I'm feeding myself by what I'm thinking. So really to enhance that would be a big part of getting intentional about your thoughts and where you're connecting into.
I love that. Getting intentional about our thoughts. Can you tell us a little bit of some of the practices that can help us with that? So I
Mhm.
know personally, journaling has been something for me that helps to kind of recognize what those thoughts are. Are
Yes.
there any other things that you would suggest?
Mhm. Yes, I think journaling is great. I think really being able to write down what's happening for you. Some of the journal prompts that you can use, especially with change, could even be first one, what are the possibilities that we talked about earlier? What's the possibilities from this situation? The second one will be, you know, what is when was the last time I experienced change? What was that like? When have I overcome change in the past? So getting your mind fixed on what you've already overcome, it'll remind you that you're resourced. You've already been here. You are able to go overcome. And the third one is really being able to know, okay, what will pay off as a result of me trusting in this process? What am I growing in? Am I now, for example, that change for me? If I just focused on, sharing my voice is so vulnerable. If I stayed in that, then I won't be focusing on the payoffs. I can be focusing on what if I fail? What if I stutter? What if I say something that, you know, is, like not what I wanted to say, or I'm not clear enough. Or I can focus on what if it actually holds a lot of impact? There's, what if that I'm actually going to grow in my comfort to share and speak with others and actually connect with people more. So really focusing on what is what the payoff can be can really help build your momentum to want to engage with the change and therefore turn into it as opposed to running from it.
Preach. I know there's someone here that needs to hear those three questions again. Let's hear those three questions again, those three prompts.
Uh,
The first
Yes.
one we said is,
What does this make
what are the
possible?
possibilities?
What is the
Mhm.
possibility from this? And how have we successfully gone through change in the past? Those are that's so great to reflect on. And the last one is, how will this pay off in the future by going through this change?
Thank you so much for sharing that again.
Yeah, of
I
course.
absolutely love that. Um, and we'll definitely be adding that to my journal as well. I'll definitely have an exercise on that. That was I love that so much. I love that so much. Um, so that's a really great way to start supporting ourselves when it comes to change. What are some tips that you would have for us when we're actually supporting others through
Mm,
change,
mhm.
right? Especially through communities, so whether it's through friends, family, co-workers, just any other community that we're a part of. How do we support others when they're going through change?
Mhm. Yeah, oftentimes I think it's important to recognize that we all experience change differently. We all experience emotions differently in terms of how we respond to those emotions sometimes. So, being able to first approach it with, I'm going to just take on a position to understand what's happening for them during this experience of change, because one person might get super excited about change and one person may be feeling more apprehensive about that change. So really taking on the position of, I'm going to be a learner right now and understand what's taking place for them, asking them questions of, what's happening for you, what's this been like for you, what's this process. And even like how I pose those questions. Those are some great questions to even help be that person of perspective for that friend, of saying, that makes sense to why you're feeling that. So validating the emotion that is coming up for them. That makes sense. It's new. It's a change. It's transition. That makes sense to why that feeling's coming up. Maybe even asking them, when have you noticed that you've overcome change successfully? Or even if you're that close friend to them and you've seen them overcome change, you can be that person to bring that to their awareness and say, hey, I remember when you overcame this here. And maybe they just needed to hear that. They needed to hear that, oh, yeah, I did overcome this. Thank you for highlighting that and bringing that into my awareness in this moment. So that can be a really great way to support. And also even asking, how can I support you during this time? What do you need from me? Do you need anything from me? And just giving them the space to really, you know, express what's helpful for them. Maybe they just need a space to talk and not have anybody to really respond much, but just a space to have someone be that sounding board. So Yeah, those would be the suggestions I have for friends supporting someone going through change.
Love that. I love that. And even the practice of kind of extended, the practice that you use for yourself onto others,
Mhm,
and asking them what they need as well, how you can support them. I think
mhm,
that's something that's so important because, as you mentioned, we all go through change so differently. Um,
mhm,
and so, my question for everyone joining us is, what are some of the possibilities of the change? Again, I want you to think about the change that you mentioned early on. What are some possibilities that are coming up for you? And
mhm,
then we can definitely discuss that more. In the meantime, Natasha,
mhm,
so we've talked about what it is to navigate change, right? As someone, what would you say to someone who wasn't here today at this talk?
mhm,
What are the three kind of top things they should know about navigating change?
mhm. Yeah, I would say the top 3 things to know when navigating change. First one would be recognize that it's okay to just normalize the uncomfortable process of change at times. The discomfort that can come up with change, it's so important to just recognize it and say that's okay to notice that. And oftentimes I feel like we tend to think discomfort equates to this is not going well. This means wrong. This means bad outcome. But really it can be the opposite. This can be the tension period that brings me into new opportunities. So I would just really be step one, normalize the discomfort that can come up when we're entering some form of uncertainty. The second point I would say is to recognize what are you telling yourself during this change? How are you guiding your thinking when you're going through change? Are you going to what ifs to the worst case scenario, or are you going to what ifs in terms of what are the possibilities? What am I growing from? What is this teaching me? And what's a long-term impact? And the third one would be I would suggest really getting connected in community. That would be the third aspect of change is that you do not need to go through change alone. We love to be in we're human beings that are in need of love and connection, and going through change alone does not need to be the case. So really getting connected with people that you trust, that you know will give you sound wisdom, you know that you feel heard and safe with emotionally, and just getting connected in that area. So, yeah, those would be my 3 takeaways.
Amazing, amazing. Especially that last one, that hits home. And I
Mm,
think, and I definitely can say for myself and Chanel, that was one of the driving factor behind why we started the village. We
mm,
were going through change. And so um, having this idea to kind of build community
mm,
as a support system, but also finding others that we can support as they go through change as well.
mhm,
So I absolutely love that so much.
yeah,
Um, and so we have some shares from my last question. I'm talking about what's the possibility of change.
mhm,
Um, and so we have renewed purpose and happiness. Absolutely love that for you. I love that for everyone, actually. I'm gonna
yes,
extend that for everyone. Love that. We also have growth, meeting new people, new opportunities, expansion, and new experiences.
mhm,
Absolutely, Kaylin. Love that. Internal growth. Love that as well. That's
good.
that's amazing. We have, let's see, develop new interests and growth. Again, just a common thread between everything that was shared.
Mhm,
Um, I see some people are saying same. Yeah. We have, yeah, Caitlin said, I'm so glad I joined this community to go through this change. So happy that you're here as well. We absolutely love that. Um, and then we have Stephanie that shared further personal development and growth,
mm,
learning, maybe even unlearning, confidence and building.
yes,
Yes, that you definitely hit the nail on its head, especially with the unlearning,
mhm,
which is also something that you go through change, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're basing this new experience based on your old one that maybe didn't go so well and trying to unlearn that. That's yeah, that's key.
Yeah,
That's
that's great.
definitely key.
I That's so important, especially when addressing the mindset piece. When we're going and when we notice the trigger come up originally, like that heart rapid beating, sometimes we need to unlearn our perspective of change, unlearn what is our previous conditioning of change, because sometimes we can be so comfortable in that certainty that we only think change is, this is bad. This is not. This is only going to result in poor outcomes, but really, really reframing that is a part of unlearning. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, definitely. So Natasha, earlier you mentioned, the importance of connecting with community. You
Hmm.
also gave us some tips, some prompts, some journal prompts on what we can use to kind of help us navigate through this change. Um, my question is, when should someone actually seek professional help
Hmm.
to address any challenges that they're having with change? And it's a two-part question. So when should they, and also kind of what should they be looking for? Like what type of professional should they be looking for? Is there anything that they need to consider?
Yeah. Well, if you're looking for professional help, I think, or when the best time to look for professional help, I like to really be an advocate for mental health doesn't always need to be, I'm in crisis mode and that's when I need to talk to a professional. It's so important to just get proactive as well, uh, about your mental health, and recognizing that prioritizing your mental health is actually helping you respond to crises that can arise. So really being able to say, you know, maybe I'm going through changes, or I'm noticing patterns of behavior come up that I want to be able to work on and I want to be able to address. Maybe I'm noticing, I have, like was shared in the chat, unlearnings. I'm noticing that there's certain thoughts that keep coming up that are just so automatic, and I'm noticing myself going even on this threat response mode. That can be an indicator that, I want to take a moment to really get intentional, to have a space to talk about what's happening for me in those moments. And a professional, like a therapist or an empowerment coach, can also walk you through what's taking place to understand, okay, where is that thinking really serving you here? And also just normalizing that makes sense, like how we talked about in the past. Maybe that thought process was helpful for our survival then. Maybe that makes sense because we needed that to survive at some point. But now we can say, but today I don't need to hold on to that one. And really being able to know what you will replace that thought with, and constructing that with someone, co-creating what those new thoughts will be intentionally before you're even experiencing that sense of threat or that feeling of panic, can be so helpful for your mental health and your well-being, because it limits you from going on to these high panic modes. So yeah, I would highly suggest, just, like I said, I'm a big advocate on normalizing getting professional help when you're not in crisis. If you want to work on yourself and there's things that are coming up for you that you want to dig deeper into, that's time to go and say, I can get connected with a professional. In terms of what to look out for in a professional, so if you're speaking with a therapist, I know Psychology Today has a list of therapists available, and you can go on there. You can check out the different therapists. It's almost like a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a format of all these different therapists, and you get to read all their bios, and it's a directory of all the different places, people that are in your area that specialize in certain aspects. And you can actually set up a consult call typically to get an understanding of what their approach is to counseling. I personally am a big advocate for having a collaborative approach, having an anti-oppressive approach when looking at different cases and meeting with people, really being able to hold space for the person to work through what they're going through, and also having a solution focused approach when understanding what's been working well for you. Sometimes we can go to more problem focus, but a solution focused approach can really help understand what's working well and recognizing how how those things have resourced you. So yeah, big thing would just be to make sure that you feel like this person's a good fit for you. I know 80% of the success of counseling or seeking mental health professional help is the relationship that you have with that individual. So really, trusting if you feel safe emotionally with that person and you want to open up with that person, that would be a big tip to tune into that. So those would be my suggestions in that area.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, and actually, for yourself as a psychotherapist, is there do you specialize in terms of the
Mhm.
types of clients that you take on or the types of themes that you work with in particular? And are you currently accepting clients?
Yeah. So for myself, currently, I'm not accepting clients. But if you did want to follow me on social media, I will be posting on there just content, and also when I have more of my practice up and running to accept new clients. But I do typically specialize in, like what I mentioned, the assertiveness component. I have more. The coaching side would be more self leadership. So if you're moving into a role where you need to now, you know, I know in the chat mentioned going into a different role can require some different communication styles that can come up. So really being able to understand how do I get equipped to move into this role? What are some of the barriers of getting me into this role? And how do I navigate those? As well as on a mental health psychotherapy perspective, I do specialize more in anxiety, in relationships. Couples counseling is something that I have been specialized in. So, yeah, that would be my area of expertise, more so relationships and navigating what's happening for you. So, just go working through that and being able to honor your needs and ask for what you need.
Amazing, amazing. Well, what's really great here in the village is that Natasha's going to be with us, doing lots of great things coming up. So you can definitely send Natasha a message if you had a particular question, or if you want to join maybe a wait list if she has one to get on there. Um, but this is our time for questions. So if you do have a question, I invite you to either put that in the chat. And I know some people already started doing that. Or you can raise your hand and then we can definitely call you by your name and you can ask your question then. Um, so let's see what we have in our chat so far for questions. So we have a question here from Esther that says, how do you know the line between discomfort, which triggers resilience and growth, and discomfort that can be harmful? Very
Mm-hmm.
good question.
Yeah, I would think discomfort that is harmful. That's why I really like to tune into the body and really pay attention to your needs that way, because when it becomes harmful, let's say we're not replenishing our body, we don't have the resources physically to deal with things at that point. So sometimes kind of going through the next thing to the next thing and kind of this like hustle mentality, sometimes we forget that we can need to have time to replenish. So that's where I would say that discomfort can be unproductive, because we're not taking the space to really fill our cup and allow ourselves to partake in self-care. When it becomes productive and that discomfort is when we're allowing ourselves to recognize that, like I said, that part is there, that discomfort is there, and how do I harness the context around it? Am I taking care of myself? Am I taking care of my basic needs? So am I hydrating? Am I getting proper sleep? Am i am i connecting to a community that is actually uplifting? Am I practicing self-compassion? How am I talking to myself in these moments? And that's when you get to say, okay, it's okay to feel uncomfortable right now. I'm still taking care of myself. I'm still i'm still doing the things I need to do in order to succeed and build that resilience. And really being able to kind of go through that checklist can be helpful way to discern that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think you definitely hit an important point, and what I would consider, when we think about resiliency, well, what are some of the healthy habits for that? because, sometimes it can also be a little bit unhealthy as well. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for sharing that. We have some other comments here. So we have Simi that shared, reaching out before a crisis is also important because it can take time finding the right fit for you and them having availability.
Mhm.
Absolutely true. And therefore, even more reasons as to why sometimes doing it more from a preventative measure, it can
Mhm.
be super helpful. I found a good therapist after a few months looking, then a crisis hit just a week before my first session with them. So
Hmm.
there we have it. Talk about timing.
Mhm.
Talk about timing. We also have someone that shared, I did therapy for a few months and it was very helpful.
Good.
Same. As I mentioned last year, I started therapy and really helped me uncover, some of the thoughts that I were having and kind of why they were there,
Yeah.
and work on my mindset. So
Mhm.
that was something that was work that needed to be done on my end to help me kind of transition and navigate through the changes that I'm currently going through.
Mhm.
I don't think I would have been able to navigate it in the way that I'm doing it now if I hadn't had those important sessions.
Good. That's
Are there
great.
some other Yeah, are there some other tips that you would have for anyone that's navigating through change and maybe don't have access to mental health professional at this
Mhm.
time? I know you gave us some great prompts. Is there
Mhm.
anything else that we should consider as well?
Yeah, I would really recommend paying attention to what information we're paying attention to. So really understanding that knowledge is power, it holds power. So what we're feeding in our knowledge department really impacts how we think and how we feel and how we behave. So I would really recommend, I think there was a post that I saw, I don't know if it was here, but post that I saw about really checking your social media detox. Are you connected to a community, or who are you even following on social media? If you spend a lot of time on social media, I know that scrolling and picking up on information through your feed can trickle into your subconscious. So my recommendation would be following accounts that are uplifting, and also even being a part of this inner village. I know I was talking to you before about how if I were to completely detox from social media and I just needed one app to pay attention to, because that's how I am. I don't know how to just like not just go cold turkey. I need to like at least substitute it with something. So before it was Pinterest, it would definitely be the inner village, because it's just such a positive community. Yes, it's such a positive community, and just really being able to know what information you're taking in is so impactful to growth, and what you're feeding yourself. So yeah, I would just stay connected with the free resources that are available. Digital media detox. Yes. Exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel the same way as well. I mean, now, like, I can go a day or so or even more without going on those other social media channels and really just come into Inner Village and tapping into, the people that I know I would love to hear from, or um, being more responsible with the type of content I choose
Mm.
to digest as well. So those are super helpful tips so much. So we thank you so much for being with us today, Natasha. I know I've learned a lot, and I'm sure those watching and joining us can definitely share the same. I mentioned earlier that you are part of Inner Village. Um, where else can people connect with you?
Yeah. So I am the co-founder of a company called AllStrive, and that's more of a leadership development platform. We are going to be developing a course soon about how to improve your self leadership. So if you'd like to follow that account there, it's just at AllStrive. And also my page is called Take Courage with Tash, is another page where I do more mental health and mental wellness tips and information and content there. So those are the two places you can connect with me.
Right. And that's all on Instagram,
All on
correct?
Instagram. Yes, Instagram.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect,
Awesome.
perfect. That's amazing. Well, we look forward to doing more great talks with you, Natasha. This has been 1 year of just pure bliss and building this relationship with both of our communities. So thank you once again for being with us tonight. Thank you everyone for joining us as well. We have lots of great stuff in store for Inner Village. And just as a reminder, we do have our next event is coming up on Sunday. It's a restorative yoga class with Denise, Trap Soul Yoga. And so that's going to be something that's beautiful and can help your body handle and deal with the changes that you may currently be going through. So as a reminder here at the Village, which we always love to reinforce, is to remind you that you deserve to be well. Thank you all for joining us, and see you in Inner Village. Have a wonderful evening or night, depending on where you're joining.